She says it casually. Everyone has a past. I just like my freedom. It was just a phase. It sounds confident, even balanced. But listen closely. Because confidence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's protection. You see, emotional detachment rarely comes from strength. It comes from exhaustion. From loving too deeply too often without being met halfway. And when that happens, people don't stop feeling. They just stop showing it. The modern world calls this maturity. But most of the time, it's self-preservation disguised as control. In this video, we're not here to judge. We're here to understand. Because every phrase that sounds like power, I don't get attached easily, sex doesn't mean anything to me, is usually a quiet confession of pain. A defense mechanism that says, I've been hurt before, and I'm still learning how to feel safe. Once you learn to listen differently, you start hearing the truth behind the tone, how language reveals scars that never healed. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Because what you don't understand, you end up repeating. And the moment you finally see the pattern, you stop chasing what hurts you and start protecting what gives you peace. 1. Body count is just a number. She says it calmly, almost like it doesn't matter. But notice her tone, it's too smooth, too practiced. Because peace doesn't sound rehearsed. It sounds quiet. When a woman says, it's just a number, she's not being careless. She's being careful. It's a shield, not a confession. She's trying to control the meaning before you do. That's not manipulation. That's protection. She knows what the world thinks. She knows how quickly judgment arrives. So she speaks first to stay safe. But safety built on denial never lasts long. See, people only defend what they secretly doubt. If it were truly just a number, she wouldn't need to prove it. She'd let the silence explain itself. Emotionally, this line comes from shame, not pride. It's the language of someone trying to make peace with a part of themselves that still feels unaccepted. She's not trying to convince you. She's trying to convince herself. For men listening, don't attack her. Don't debate. Just listen to what her defense reveals, a wound that still needs healing. The truth is, healed women don't rationalize their past. They carry it softly. They own it without turning it into a slogan. Because peace doesn't need proof, it just exists too. Everyone has a past. She says it gently when questions start to get too close. Her eyes drop for a second, and suddenly the air feels heavier. You weren't trying to judge her, but she heard judgment in the silence anyway. Everyone has a past. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? But that phrase isn't meant to open a conversation. It's meant to close it. What she's really saying is, please don't make me relive the things I'm still ashamed of. It's not an excuse. It's a quiet request for protection. She's not seeking forgiveness. She's avoiding exposure. Every time someone says this line, they're testing how much truth love can hold. They're asking, can you see my damage and still stay? Psychologically, this is what we call reframing through empathy. It's a subtle way of lowering your defenses. You start thinking, if I ask more, I'll look insecure. And slowly guilt replaces clarity. But understanding someone's past doesn't mean pretending it doesn't exist. Real maturity isn't silence. It's honest conversation without punishment. So when you hear, everyone has a past, don't respond with judgment. But don't lose your awareness either. Say softly, I know. I just care about how you've grown since then. That single sentence separates connection from confusion. Because healed people don't hide their story. They share it. When they're ready. 3. If men can do it, women can do it too. It sounds powerful, right? Modern, confident. Fair, but listen again. The energy behind that line isn't strength, it's fatigue. It's not about freedom, it's about permission to feel less. When she says this, she's not trying to mirror men. She's trying to numb herself. To prove she can survive pain by pretending it doesn't touch her anymore. But numbness isn't liberation. It's trauma wearing confidence. Biologically, women bond differently. Intimacy triggers oxytocin, the hormone of trust, connection, safety. When that bond forms and breaks too many times, the body adapts. It produces less, it expects less, it stops asking for warmth. And so, she starts calling detachment empowerment. She'll say, I'm just doing what men do. But deep down, she's fighting a war against her own nature. Emotionally, this phrase hides grief. The grief of giving too much and feeling too little in return. The grief of loving in a world that told her feelings were weakness. So when she says it, don't roll your eyes. Just understand, she's tired. Tired of caring without being cared for. Tired of losing power through vulnerability. But power doesn't come from imitation. It comes from self-awareness. And she'll only find that when she stops trying to win a game that doesn't suit her soul. 4. I just like my freedom. She says it with a light laugh. A shrug, maybe after you ask, so what are we? She smiles, takes a sip of her drink, and says, I just like my freedom. You think she's independent. But what you're really hearing is distance. Freedom in her world isn't a goal, it's a hiding place. Because once upon a time, her love was a cage. She gave too much, she lost herself, and now the word commitment feels like a trapdoor. So she calls her avoidance empowerment, not to lie, but to cope. She wants the connection, but she fears the cost. She wants to be chosen, but she's terrified of being caught. In psychology, we call this avoidant conditioning. It's when safety and love feel like opposites. So she keeps her heart half open, enough to feel wanted, but never enough to feel vulnerable. The irony is she's not free at all. She's trapped in the illusion of control. You can't build a future with someone who's still running from the past. And yet, you'll try. Because her independence looks like strength. But strength without intimacy is just loneliness in disguise. If you're a man listening, remember this. A woman who truly values freedom doesn't run from connection. She chooses partners who respect it. When she says, I like my freedom, listen for what's beneath it. Because sometimes freedom is just fear, dressed beautifully. 5. I don't regret anything. I learned from it. She says it with poise, her tone steady, her smile practiced. It sounds like peace, but it isn't. That line isn't growth, it's armor. When she says she doesn't regret anything, what she means is, I can't afford to regret it. Because regret feels like weakness. And weakness, to her, is dangerous. In psychology, we call this cognitive reframing without behavioral change. It's when someone renames their mistakes, lessons, without actually learning from them. It's comforting. It makes pain sound productive. But here's the truth. Growth isn't about renaming pain. It's about revisiting it, facing it, owning it. When she repeats, I learned from it, she's not lying. She's surviving. She's protecting the story she tells herself to avoid accountability. Because accountability feels like collapse. The healed version of that line sounds different. It's quieter. It goes, yes, I made mistakes, and I wish I'd done better. That's growth. The kind that doesn't need a caption. So when you hear, I don't regret anything, listen to the silence after. That pause always reveals the truth. 6. It was just a phase. Oh, she laughs when she says it light, playful, almost like she's brushing dust off a memory. But behind that tone, there's rewriting happening. It was just a phase. That's not insight. That's self-erasure. It's how people separate from their own choices without confronting them. Because calling something a phase turns regret into nostalgia. In therapy, this is a form of disassociation. It's when the mind protects itself by pretending the person who made those choices isn't the same person standing here now. But the truth is, she didn't outgrow that version of herself. She just learned how to hide her patterns better. When someone says, was just a phase, they want you to believe it's gone. But the habits born in that phase, the emotional avoidance, the thrill-seeking, the constant need for distraction, don't disappear, they evolve. That's why history repeats itself. Because the lesson never truly got absorbed. So, when you hear her say it, don't judge her. But don't romanticize it either. Say gently, maybe it was a phase, but did it change you, or just distract you? That one question separates healing from hiding. Because a healed woman says, I made mistakes, and I've grown. A guarded one says, that wasn't me. 7. Sex doesn't mean anything to me. She says it casually, like it's no big deal. Maybe she even laughs. But that one line, is one of the saddest forms of protection. It's not empowerment, it's exhaustion. When intimacy stops meaning something, that's not freedom. That's emotional shutdown. Biologically, every time a woman is intimate, her body releases oxytocin, the hormone that builds trust and bonding. It's what makes closeness feel safe. But when that bond forms and breaks too often, the body learns to stop expecting connection. So, she adapts. She trains herself to disconnect before she can get hurt. She convinces herself that sex is just physical, because emotional attachment feels like danger. What began as heartbreak turns into habit, and what began as rebellion becomes numbness. Most men misunderstand that. They think it's confidence, that she's just low maintenance. But numbness isn't maturity. It's survival mode. So when she says, sex doesn't mean anything to me, what she's really saying is, it used to, and I wish it still did. You can't fix that. You can only recognize it, because once someone trains themselves not to feel, no amount of affection can reach them, until they decide to feel again. 8. I don't get attached easily. It sounds powerful, collected, cool, in control. But that line isn't confidence. It's depletion. People don't stop getting attached because they've become wise. They stop because they've become tired. Tired of giving, of losing, of trying again and again only to end up empty. In psychology, this is called defensive detachment. It's not a choice. It's a reflex. It's the nervous system saying, I'm done risking pain. She's not avoiding love out of arrogance. She's avoiding it out of survival. She's built walls so high that even she can't climb them anymore. And from the outside, you'll think she's composed, untouchable. But what you're really seeing is emotional burnout. The woman who says, I don't get attached easily, has probably felt the deepest once, and lost more than you can imagine. Now, she calls it strength. But it's not strength, it's surrender. Because when you stop expecting anything, you can't be disappointed anymore. That's the final stage of heartbreak, not pain, but numbness. 8 phrases, 8 masks. Each one sounds harmless. But every word carries a memory of guilt, exhaustion, denial, and loss. Language always leaves fingerprints. Even when someone hides behind confidence, you can still hear the echo of what broke them. These phrases don't make her bad. They make her human. Every sentence is just emotional self-defense spoken out loud. When you start listening differently, you realize no one really becomes detached by choice. They become detached by repetition. So the next time you hear any of these lines, don't react. Observe. Not with judgment, but with awareness. Because once you understand the meaning beneath the words, you stop taking them personally. You stop confusing defense for disrespect. And you start seeing people for what they really are. Wounded, guarded, and trying to survive. Attraction without awareness is chaos. Awareness without boundaries is surrender. When you understand the psychology behind words, you stop being reactive and start being conscious. Because here's the truth. You can't save someone still loyal to their pain. You can't build something real with someone still fighting their past. But you can stay awake. You can listen for silence. You can protect your peace. And maybe, in that awareness, you'll stop chasing the illusion of connection and start choosing what's truly safe, a love that doesn't need protection because it's already rooted in peace. Maybe now you see it clearer. Those phrases weren't arrogance. They were echoes, tiny pieces of survival stitched into sentences. When a woman says, I'm fine, sometimes it means, I'm still bleeding but quietly. When she says, I don't get attached, it means, I used to, and it nearly destroyed me. Every word carries a memory. Every pause hides a boundary built from pain. And that's the lesson here. You can't love someone's armor and call it intimacy. You can't fix someone who's still fighting ghosts. But you can understand. You can listen. You can respect the journey that made her guarded. Because connection isn't about rescuing. It's about recognizing, seeing the patterns without losing your peace inside them. So, The next time you hear these phrases, don't argue. Don't chase clarity that isn't ready to be shared. Just breathe, observe, and remember, the way people protect themselves is often the story of how they were once hurt. In the end, emotional intelligence isn't about decoding others. It's about staying whole while you do. If you felt something while listening, don't forget to follow. Not for the drama, but for the lessons that turn pain into perspective.